Welcome, everybody, to the Unnormalized Podcast. This is your host, Frankie A., with another awesome episode of Unnormalized Podcast with a great special guest here to talk to me about living life unnormalized and all that comes with that. Welcome me to the show with me. A special guest that I was really excited to have on because he's like on. I was just telling him he's like on all my favorite shows that I watch. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, everybody. Julian Haig. Julian, welcome to the Unnormalized Podcast.
It is, Frankie. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So, for those of you who may not know Julian, Julian has actually been on a couple of really big hit shows that have been hitting a lot of the pop culture fanatics out there. So some of the shows that he's been on has been Arrow, he's been on Lucifer, he's been on Once Upon a Time, big huge hit, and he's now on one of my favorite shows that's gained a lot of traction in the last couple seasons. He's been on the show Riverdale, which, if people don't know Riverdale, it is you've
been living under a rock if you don't.
Yeah, you've been living under a rock, and it is a version of the Archie comics. A little darker take on the Archie comics, I have to say.
Yeah.
But
slightly sexier, yeah.
Sexier, darker, all that kind of stuff. So if you like that kind of thing, you definitely got to check it out. So Julian, thanks.
Sexy, check out Riverdale.
Check out Riverdale, right?
Yeah.
All the big stars are like yourself are coming out of Riverdale. So I'm excited to see what the future kind of holds for you. But Julian, why don't you tell people who may not kind of know who Julian is? Well, first of all, I have to say Julian is my first Aussie interview that I've ever had.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess I forget that people don't know that I'm Australian.
Yeah.
And I think I might be the only Australian on the show because KJ, who plays Archie, he's Kiwi. He's from New Zealand. But, yeah, because I do an American accent, I guess a lot of people assume I'm American. But no, Aussie. Currently living back in Melbourne, Australia at the moment. And, I mean, that's a big question. Who am I?
So, the reason why I ask people to start there is because I'm a social worker by trade. So I like to
and you do life coaching as well, that sort of thing?
Yes, I do life coaching and I do social work in behavioral mental health. So I like to kind of talk to people about where they're rooted because I think it lends to their path and a lot of their decision making to where they are now in life and in career. So just, tell us a little bit about growing up and living life in Australia and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, I consider myself incredibly lucky to be from Australia in general. And then also I'm from the Mornington Peninsula, which is about an hour drive southeast of Melbourne. And I grew up down there on, we had about 5 acres and it was kind of a bit of a farm really. And it's also, because it's a peninsula, it's also a coastal area. Mm-hmm. So I grew up, basically on the beach and then plenty of space and it's just beautiful down there. It's really amazing. Not to say that there wasn't hardship growing up or anything like that, but it was kind of a really great place to play as a kid and lots of you got a lot of freedom and there's a lot of trust in just riding your bike down the road. You're gone for hours just to go buy some lollies or something down at the shop. And then a bit of beach culture and beach life is also. I think it's a really healthy way of being and learning to surf and sort of connecting with nature and it's interesting how when you meet surfers when you're traveling and stuff, there's a similar kind of mentality of not taking life too seriously and kind of going with the flow a bit as well, like laid back, going with the flow, able to kind of like not have to have control over everything. Because I think you learn that with surfing, especially, that you just, if you try and control what's going on out there, then you're going to get smashed. You're going to get beaten up. So, yeah, it's a good tool, I think, for life.
Well, I don't surf, but I do live, and it's probably nowhere near as nice as where you are in Australia or where you grew up on the beach. But I live right by the beach here in New Jersey, in Point Pleasant Beach. So I can attest to that tremendously. There's just something about beach life. I don't know if it's in the air. I don't know if it's just that type of environment or kind of culture that comes with living the beach life, where you appreciate nature for what it is, because it's so in front of you and so grandiose a display of it, that it has a way of kind of putting you into perspective and kind of making you realize, like, maybe not how small you are, but yeah, kind of how small you are in comparison to the things out there. So I definitely can attest to how there's just something about the beach life. I
hadn't been for a surf in a very long time, because I was in Vancouver most of this year, just doing a few more episodes on season 3, towards the end of season 3 of Riverdale. And I went for a surf last week, and it was just like, the surf was just absolutely pumping. And I went out to this spot by myself, and it was like, it can be pretty sketchy, it can be pretty scary. And and also just so beautiful. Like, you get down there and the beach, it's just like breathtaking, the beaches down there. And it's kind of like this, it's a bit of a reset. You've got no choice but to be present, really. Like, you just have to be in that moment. And so you become very alert and very, I think that can kind of happen with this sort of thing, and with acting as well. I think that maybe that's part of what I love about acting as well. It's like, you're kind of forced to get present, and you need to be present. And it's impossible to be 100% present, like, all the time. It's impossible. But like, as focused as possible, and refocusing as much as possible. Once again, because if you don't, then, bad, like, the ocean, you don't want to, it's like that thing, you don't want to turn your back on the ocean kind of thing.
I always tell people who come, like, especially young ones that I have in my family or my friends, and I bring them into the ocean, and I always tell them, you never turn your back on the ocean. I used to be a lifeguard at one point in my life, so I always tell people, you never take the ocean for granted, you never turn your back on the ocean. You have to have a lot of tremendous respect for the ocean, because it is a force out there, and it's nothing to mess around with. I mean, so I love that when you say that, you can never turn your back on it. It's a good lesson for life too. You never want to turn your back on life, because things may pass you by, and someone in your field, that's absolutely a great message to send out to people. So when was the first time, because this is an unconventional career path for someone to take. So how did you get into, like, when was the first time that you kind of got bit by that acting bug?
I actually caught up with, because my sort of way into acting hasn't been, like, I guess, the normal, coming out of high school straight into acting school, straight into getting an agent, blah blah blah. It's been a bit different, maybe even a bit more of a late start. But I caught up with my high school drama teacher. I changed schools when I was about 15 or 16. So I only did it in high school for a couple of years. But we had a really good catch up the other day down in my hometown. And I think it was probably then. And she said that me and one of my best mates, Brent, we call him Buffer. We were in the same class, and she said that like straight away, because she said like we were kind of, I didn't think we were popular or cool, but she said like you guys were kind of, she didn't know what to make of us at first, because she thought we were kind of like the popular kids. And like she said that when those kids, if they sit back and they're all like turn their nose up like what's going on here, then she knows it's going to be a tough class. But she said that we straight away were like so into it. And like she said that it's pretty quickly the first class, like he was pretending to give birth and I was delivering the baby, and like this crazy stuff's going on. And I remember like we would make up plays about all sorts of stuff, and we'd just go for it and just had a lot of fun with it. And I just remember, like really enjoying that, because in her class it wasn't so much like doing theatre, doing plays. It was a bit more freestyle, a bit more improv, and making stuff up ourselves. And so I think that was sort of my first taste of it, and I just really loved it. But then when I moved high schools, I thought it'd be like social suicide to do drama at my new school. It's like so dumb, but as a teenager, you're just trying so hard to fit in and
sure, yeah,
whatever. But if I could have my time again, I would definitely keep doing drama the whole way through. And then so I think that's where it bit me. And then for a long time, I was avoiding doing anything where I stood out. So even though I wanted to do acting, I wanted to do modeling as well when I was a teenager. I didn't really do it until about 21-ish, and I started getting into a bit of modeling then. And even then I was like, oh, it's a bit late, but like, I just kind of kept getting into that sort of stuff. And then later on I was like, okay, it got to a point where like so many things were pointing me in the direction of acting that I couldn't ignore anymore. And I was like, okay. And I decided, okay, I've got to study acting. I want to do this properly. And got into an acting school in Melbourne. And you could break it down so much, but that's probably
And it's funny that you say that, because when I do this show, I talking to different people in different fields, and what they do the best. There's almost a common thread, and it's
100%.
almost like an unexplained pull towards what they're doing now. So like if there was a conventional path that they were trying to follow, or looking for their family to have them follow, there's almost like a pull that draws them to what they should be doing. And that's kind of the premise of the show, Julian, is that we want to talk about and have the message that that's like the crossroads. So when you get that inner voice that kind of is telling you, or pulling you towards something, you have to entertain that. You have to explore it to its fullest potential before you just disregard it.
I think people call it different things too. Like it could be, in acting terms, it's kind of like you're super objective. It's like, or like a need, like what's your deep need? What's your deep desire? And then some people just call it kind of fire in the belly. Like, what is it that, really, or just the dream. And I think, you're right. Most people, I think we all have a dream. We all have some, or maybe it could be a couple of things. And for the most, and it's also probably the scariest thing you can think of doing. And for most people, we tend to avoid it. And I think it takes a lot of courage to kind of say, this is what I want to do. And honestly, like the hardest part was actually admitting it to myself. Like that was or maybe that wasn't the hardest part, but that was the first part. And then admitting it to the world, like my family, who are actually all artists themselves, my family and friends, like we think that we're going to be rejected for it for whatever reason, and it's not the truth. And if it is the truth, then maybe your friends and family are tough people to be around. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's and you're right. Like, it's a common thread because it's really the hero's journey. I don't know if you've heard of that, like the Joseph Campbell thing, and
yes,
the stories that go way back, stories that we've told throughout history, they all tend to be that hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell thing, and that's why we connect with all these stories, like everything from Star Wars to Hunger Games to whatever, even Riverdale, everything. It's we all connect to that what's our dream, what's in the way, what are the obstacles, and then overcoming those obstacles. We connect to that because that's life.
So did you feel like you said your family you come from a family of artists. So what was it? I know having probably that conversation with them in your mind was a little difficult, but how did that play on? How did that play out with having such an artistic family? Where they, because I've also talked to people who are in business and maybe have small kids now, and they're like, I don't necessarily know if I want my child to go through, because it's such a tough industry, and you have to have a certain build and makeup to handle rejection, to handle criticism.
I think it's also, the main thing is to handle the uncertainty, because I think that's what, especially as actors, when you don't have a project coming up and all you're doing is auditioning, and you're in this space of like, that's when like more doubt can come in. That's when more fear can come in. And I think for our loved ones, we don't want them to go through that. So when I first told my sister about it, because she's doing pretty well with her acting career, she was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And like, it wasn't like, oh my God, great. And I think it's kind of twofold, because what she said was, because we had this conversation on the phone, and I was like, I've just been to this workshop and it was incredible. Like, I want to do this. It's so great. And then I was at a Larry Moss masterclass, and I was watching, and it was just insane. And she was like, after the conversation where she was not that excited for me, I texted her just being like, hey, just letting you know, it doesn't seem like you really want me to do this, and at this point, I'm just going to go for it, like, whatever. And then she was like, she called me back, and she was like, you can't text me that. I am excited, I am pumped. And then she's like, but I am also, like, I know how hard it is, and it's a tough road, and it's a big mountain to climb. And then I think what wasn't said, and maybe this is just my opinion, but our family dynamic is like, she's the oldest sibling.
Okay.
So
Okay.
firstborn, I'm the secondborn. And I guess it doesn't really feel like there is a rivalry or anything, but I think the dynamic is that normally she's got the spotlight and I sit back. And so, when that's normally the dynamic and things are shifting, it can be, it's.
I mean, that just comes from. Is it just the two of you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm very familiar with, you're a baby brother, correct?
Correct.
Very similar situation on my end. I have older sister, and it's been that kind of journey, and there is always that, kind of protective side of the relationship. But then there's also, because we're so close in age, there's only 3 years difference between
Same.
myself and my sister. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So
Yeah.
there's also, because you're so close in age, there is a rivalry that comes with just being naturally brother and sister.
I think
You
I
know,
think I think I've gotten more comfortable recently because I think before I was trying so hard to be kind of this good guy that doesn't compete and says he doesn't compete or whatever. And yeah, an acting teacher who actually knows my sister really well in Vancouver. I said that to her, and she was like, "Well, maybe you should compete a little bit."
yeah,
And it was really just for my sake, because then you go like, "Oh, you know what? Like, it's okay if I wanna beat her or if I
yeah,
wanna," and that's kind
yeah.
of like it's not unhealthy. It's
No.
kind of like, and I like being competitive, but it's not like a pride thing. It's not an
Mhm.
ego thing. It's just like, come on, like I want to go for it too. I want to see if
Yeah.
I can. And yeah, so it's been a bit of a, and it's interesting too because after I went through a bit of that stuff, I then booked Riverdale and Arrow in the same week,
Oh,
and I was,
wow.
God, stuff's happening. This is crazy. Yeah.
So then, what is that phone call like to your sister, who may have had some trepidatious feelings for her younger brother trying to get into this, kind of, and probably rightfully so, because she knew she had been in the business for a while, so she knows what comes with that, and a lot of it is probably heartache, rather than excitement, because you just booked a job. But when you're a baby brother and you're a new actor coming into the world and you're booking two major shows, you said within like a week of each other, right?
I think the auditions were 2 days apart. Yeah.
Wow.
It was pretty
So
cool. I mean, it was very cool because like it wasn't that long ago that I was just, yeah, at acting school and dreaming about getting into the industry. Um, yeah, so I can't really remember the phone call. I remember the phone call from my agent, and I was in a cafe and I started crying. But besides that, I was like, yes, woo, and then just like, oh my god. Um, but I think, yeah, no, she's been really pumped. Like it, when really I'm quite lucky. My family's super supportive, and um, I think when you know when people can't celebrate your wins, then I think that they've got some work to do on themselves. But yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
generally it's been you know the family has been really supporting my wins, and yeah, it's been pretty good.
And I think, from my own experience, because and I've spoken about this on many issues, that I was at one of those junctures myself, at the crossroads, and because of what I felt the family wanted me to do,
Yeah,
and some of the vibes that I was getting from the family, that I went the more conventional route. So when I sat down and when I work with people, I try to instill in them, because when I work with people, a lot of the times, hangups that they have now, besides like trauma and all that kind of stuff, tend
yeah,
to be from a point where they almost kick themselves in the ass for not making certain decisions at that crossroad, that now they feel that they can't recoup those things back. So that's where I kind of came up with the whole premise of unnormalized, is because people are so busy trying to chase that normal perception of what
well, it
life's
is
supposed to be.
it is very tough when you grow up or you're in a whatever kind of community or society where you're getting a lot of pressure from a lot of people to be a certain way or do a certain
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
So it is very tricky to listen to that part of yourself that's saying like, actually, I want to be doing this. Like, why aren't you listening
Hmm.
to me?
Yeah.
Um, And that part of yourself, it's so tricky because it's not like it's going to be loud and just go like, stop listening to people, because those other voices can be louder.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the end of the day, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that what someone thinks their dad wants them to do or thinks their mum wants them to do is a projection of your psychology. So even if that person's parents have been saying the whole time growing up, like, you need to go to med school, you need to do that, still, it's still like you thinking that you have to do that is still, you don't know for sure exactly what other people are thinking anyway. It's just a projection at that point of what is going on, what you think they're thinking, which can be a head fuck. I don't know if we can do that on this show.
But you absolutely can.
Great. It can be a bit of a head fuck. So our idea of what our friends want us to do, or what we think will help us fit. I mean, honestly, like, I was really scared of what my friends would think when I started modeling. I didn't tell anybody. I was so scared. And now it's just like, it doesn't matter. But I was really lucky. I met some mates at university who were just like, dude, you should do this or that, or like, why, like, they kind of saw more in me than I did at that point.
Yeah.
Or like, the stuff that was quieter. So I think maybe it helps when you meet people that are like, hey, have you thought about doing that? And then that trick, like, it's not that's a new idea. It's reaffirming that deeper dream or belief in yourself.
Yes.
And I think as well, something I try and tell people is that when your parents or close friends, if they're giving you advice that sucks, or if they're like trying to, if they're saying, whatever advice anyone close to you really is giving you is basically like, I want you to be happy. Their subtext is, I want you to be safe. I want you to be secure because I love you.
Mm-hmm.
So the words might be, go to med school. And I'm not nothing against med school. If you want to be a doctor, that's great. It's a great profession. But if you really, really don't, and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of conflict within yourself, you got to realize that, that's really just a parent trying to take care of their kid and trying to create a life for you they're projecting themselves onto you. Like, what should they have done? What's going to make them feel good? And if you can translate whatever they're saying just into, I love you, I support you, then you realize, like, oh, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It might take them a little bit of time to come around to that, and that's okay. Let them do them, but like, I need to live my life. Like, I need to live in, and that's what I think alignment is as well. It's like living in line with that true self.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Reality.
and I think you framed it perfectly, because I have a 17-year-old son, and I often tell him he's like at that juncture where like he's going from being a young man to a grown man, responsible for his own decisions. And, I tell him often that I don't care what you do, as long as whatever you're doing, you do it with 100% dedication and passion. And if it doesn't work out, you could try something different. Life doesn't have to be a one size fits all, one type of road you're going to hit many crossroads.
I mean, also that path and that journey isn't necessarily linear. Like walking up a mountain, you don't just walk straight up a mountain. Mm-hmm. You walk, side to side. Sometimes you've got to go down before you can go back up. Yep. And for me, like at university, I studied sport and exercise science, and the whole time through this I've had other jobs. When I was at acting school, I was working in a cafe. The whole time I was living in Vancouver, I was working in a fitness studio. And now that I'm back in Melbourne, I'm working at F45 and teaching classes. And is that what I want to do? Not necessarily, but is it in line with who I am? I think yes. And so you've got to support yourself while you go for this thing. And so it's interesting how, like, even though I went kind of off that path, I was on that path the whole time, but I was at university studying this, sports science, having a great time. And I was really, I was like investing in that, but also growing a lot and holistically, not just like, okay, like I need to just smash sports science and be the best sports scientist I can be. It's like, it was really kind of everything, growing in lots of different ways. And I've used a lot of that stuff with teaching and with training, and it's a really great job. I really love it. It doesn't feel like work. I get to work with great people at the gym, like the other trainers are great fun, and I get to work with clients and people and help them with their fitness stuff. And if we get into deeper chats like this, I get to help them with life stuff. And so it's it's an interesting journey, right? Like it's not this one track.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people get kind of hung up on, is because when they kind of reach those winding roads or different paths where you have to go up or you go down, they second guess themselves, like that's not how the journey is supposed to go, but that is actually how the journey goes, and that's how you learn what skills, what tools you need to kind of get you to that next part of the journey. And you're forever evolving that mountaintop. If you're doing it correctly, I often tell people you will never reach the mountaintop because you're always trying to find a different road to the top. So therefore,
it's just like there's always going to be a new objective when you attain any objective. Like as soon as you get there, it's like, okay, what's next? And like we just can't help that. That's just our nature. We just want things, and that's all right.
Yeah, that's just how I think. That's just how we're supposed to be made up. I
think kind of what we're talking about too is when people get, and I've been in this recently, and I've had to like pull myself out of it and get some perspective, which was like it felt like a bit of a step backwards recently, kind of having to come back to Australia and reset a bit. But I'm also like, whenever I felt like I've taken steps backwards, whether it's, kind of in life or even at acting school, learning the craft of acting, whenever I took that step backwards, that's when I learned way more.
Oh, sure.
I do when you're just like, oh, I'm smashing it. I'm taking big steps up. It's when you just like, and you got to learn those things and hopefully get the lesson so you don't repeat certain mistakes. And love a good life analogy.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it in a field like yourself where you do have that downtime where you are kind of forced to look at like retrospectively where you are. I mean, in your line of work, even character from character, because you pull stuff, you put so much into it that when you're kind of sitting back from it all, I think it's a time where you need to reflect on who you are, to regain yourself kind of back to who Julian is. You know what I mean? Because it's probably so easy to get lost in a character, or especially a character that people see all the time on television, or something like that.
I don't know. I think I've got pretty good perspective on, or maybe it is I've got a strong sense of self. maybe, maybe not. Sometimes
No,
I
no.
think.
For
Sometimes I think,
somebody
I don't
who
know.
does this for a living, I could say that you pretty much have a good sense of like who you are and how to gain perspective and centered, and seems like you're
Yeah,
very in tune with
I
it
mean,
with yourself.
I do get lost from time to time, and I think I don't think anyone likes that time
Yeah.
or that feeling. It's pretty icky, but I also sometimes feel quite comfortable in that, like, not really knowing who I am, and I think that also actors need a little bit of that too, because if you want to explore it's two pronged. I think if you want to explore other characters, you have to be able to let go of yourself to some regard, and then also if you want to relate to characters, you also need to know yourself quite well. So
Hmm.
how can I relate to that? What themes in my life are like that with the characters? Um, but generally, I haven't felt too lost. You know, yeah, sometimes it can be a little bit discombobulating, but I don't know that. I think, yeah, also with the Riverdale, because you're getting a lot of exposure on Riverdale, and I'm playing my character's a bad guy. Like
Yeah.
he's,
Hmm.
like the messages I get from people are like, I I hate your character. Um, but even I think like a bit of perspective is like, even if someone was to be like, I hate you, I know that it's not me. And
Hmm.
also, I mean, on social media,
Yeah.
it's really,
Her,
how do you
her,
know the person? And then even in life, like if someone was to come up to me and say like, I hate you, I think it would be jarring, and I'd probably be a little hurt, but I think I'll be able to get perspective fairly quickly that like, oh, that person isn't doing so well, and really they just hate themselves in some regard, or you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. and
action.
and I and I think also because and that's another neat thing about doing a show with people who are I'm like a pop culture fanatic, so that's where a lot of this kind of stems from, and I'm mixing it with what I do for a living and all that kind of stuff. It's just a mixed bag of who I am. So, but part of that is I think that we get as fans, we get so caught up in the character and not realizing that there is a person behind that this is their craft, that this is it's Julian's job to get you to hate that character, or to think that character is an asshole, but that you have to be able to separate the two, that he is playing a part.
I actually love that. Like, I mean, before I even really got stuck into that character, I was like, I know that I want people to hate him,
Mhm.
but I want people to enjoy watching him. And I knew that like if I have fun doing it,
Mhm.
then that should be kind of the end result. And you don't have full control over that, and also everyone's different, so it's completely subjective to the individual watching. But I think in general that was sort of the goal, mostly
Mhm.
just have fun being a dick, basically.
Dick. And listen, there's not too many jobs out there that you can be a dick and get
No,
paid for it.
not
I mean,
many.
but there's probably some out there, but not that,
Maybe a
rewarding.
maybe a CEO of some huge
some
corporation,
grimy,
some
some grimy
evil
company.
corporation killing dolphins or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides that, yeah,
But yeah, no. So like, I think that shows like this, whether big or small, when we can gain a perspective of who the person is, and what brings them to that journey, and what they're bringing to the character, kind of makes us, for lack of a better term, fall more deeper in love, or invested, maybe is a better term, with the character,
no, I get it.
because
Get it. And also, when we see people be vulnerable, um, we can't really help but connect with them. So, like we're not really seeing my character be vulnerable. We're seeing me kind of be vulnerable in putting myself out there, being an arsehole. But I think, especially some scenes that I've seen, a lot of the actors do. Like, I think Lily and Camilla, I've seen them do some incredibly emotional, and Madeline do some incredibly emotional scenes. And I get it. Like, when I was a teenager, I loved the OC, and you see, and that was kind of the teen drama of my day. But when you see actors or characters kind of putting that vulnerability out there, you can't really help but kind of love them and connect with them a bit. And it was the same thing in acting school. I remember in acting classes, you're going through so much together. When you see people really open their hearts and you see their vulnerability, and you kind of get a glimpse at their soul and their true nature, you can't help but fall in love with them a bit, and you get really close as a group. And you notice, even the tough guys in acting class, the bigger the wall, the harder they fall. And these big exterior that eventually it comes down, and you see these tears, or you see this anguish or anger or whatever, and it's so fucking beautiful, and you can't help but be wow, dude, and I feel you. I feel that,
Yeah,
So
and
I get the investment,
and
it's also got the pop culture thing going on.
Yeah,
too.
I mean that's such a great show for so many reasons. So many reasons. I mean, I'm a comic book lover, so to see the whole Archie crew kind of
come to life.
Come to life, and to come to life in a way that is the way that it's we're receiving it. It's not so, cookie cutter perfect, comic Archie, you know what I mean? It's a different spin on it. Yeah, the characters are there, but it's just so much more meatier and
if you want to make anything real, you've got to put in the struggles, and you got to put in the darker side. You got to put in the stuff that people don't really want to show. So, a lot of people talk about how it's it's not like the comic books. And it's it can't be. I mean, to make anything worth watching, there's got to be conflict and struggle and the stuff that we don't want to show people. And that's why we watch TV and movies, and we want to watch and hear stories, because in day-to-day life, most people just want to, they don't want to feel things. They don't want to show people what they're struggling with. We all kind of cover up our vulnerability. So there's our chance to go oh wow, that's what I feel. That's what I go through underneath.
Yeah. And it's there on screen. It's I think for most of us who are TV lovers, and what I love about Riverdale is I can see myself in all of those characters, especially if I transport myself. I'm a little older, but if I transport myself back into those high school years, maybe I wasn't seeing it, but there are some of each of those characters' personalities that I can say, even Veronica, you know what I mean? I'm a guy, but I can identify with being that type of
sassy teenager.
I was, that's to say the least, and
you own a speakeasy.
I wish I did, but or pops. I wouldn't mind just the pops.
Right.
You know what I mean? But no, but just that whole where maybe she trying to break from the mold of the Veronica character, where she has all this materialism, and the original Veronica was very materialistic, very much into everything, but this Veronica that we get to see, while she has all that materialism, she still has the heart for her friends and doing the right thing, and even if it means going against her family and what her family stands by. I think there's some of that, like, I can see in the teenage struggle of, being, especially nowadays where it's like, I mean, maybe not so just nowadays, but at that age where materialism is like everything
Yeah.
to most teenagers around that age.
Well, we think it is, but I think it's just more in our faces than ever before. But I have no doubt that teenagers nowadays are still incredibly intelligent, emotionally intelligent, and possibly more emotionally intelligent than ever before. Like I think we're pretty quick nowadays to just go like, oh, the selfie generation, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But that can also bring a lot of loneliness and a lot of, we don't know. We'll see what the end result is in years to come. But yeah, I think when it comes to, it seems to be especially teen dramas, for some reason, tend to really hit those, not demographics, but I guess archetypes is the word that I'm looking for, where we've got these kind of strong energies or characters, and I think it hits something in us. There's a reason why these shows are popular. It's not just that, a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a pretty people show, but it's like, no, there's something about archetypal characters or shows that we get invested, and it's because they're, like you said, they're all within us. So and we've all been to high school generally, and those archetypes are there. Like you've got the popular kids, you've got the slightly wealthier kids, the nerds, the jocks or whatever, all this stuff. And at some point, we've kind of all felt like the nerd, the geek, or like that we've wanted to hide away, that we've stood out, or that we want to be a bit more quiet, or that we want to be loud, or, the joker, the too much or whatever. Yeah. Me too. I think, all of it. And those archetypes tend to get hit really well in a teen drama because the subject matter is a high school and it's kids in high school. Whereas I think, like a TV show that's like Suits or something, like really great writing, great show and everything, but the archetypes, they're there. They're still there. You've got the nerdier guy, you've got the cool, slick guy, you've got the love interests, and you've got, right? So they're still there, but it's not as pronounced.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it makes me think of, I really wish, and I'm up to date, right, with Riverdale, but I really wish that, because having hung out with those guys, like, they're really funny. Like, KJ, Charles, like Cole, and Cammy, like, Cammy's super funny. And I just wish, like, they got to do a little bit more comedy in there, because it's kind of, it's a teen drama. It's a lot of drama, and I just love to see them be able to play more, because I know that those actors can really bring that. I know it. So I would love to see them be able to be a bit more goofy in moments, just in times. And I think they get to really let their hair down in the musical episode and go for that. But I think that
and maybe that's not so far off the beaten path for Riverdale, because dark comedies are such a big part of movies and things like that. So maybe they can, just how they tied the musical kind of episode in there, maybe they can do some stuff with that. I don't know.
Also, life isn't always serious. Like there's even, in dark moments, people try to lighten the mood, so
that's just usually how we're built.
I also just know how funny those guys are. Like even in the toughest of times this year, like we still managed to have a laugh, so.
Well, you got to keep it. I always tell people, the more that you can keep it erring on the side of humor. It's generally the points where you can maybe find the aha moments out of tougher solutions, when we don't look at things like it's so serious and so dark and drab and feels like there's no end or possibility to a solution. I think when we make kind of like, not to make light of things, but if we can learn to not take ourselves and life and all that kind of so seriously, we can kind of look at things from a different perspective. We take the power and the magnitude away from the things that are so heavy away, and then we can kind of look at things from a different perspective and say, okay, like I'm not out of this bubble of fear or
Yeah.
frustration or anger, or if I could look at it from a lighter perspective, I could usually maybe not even just find one solution, maybe I could find a couple of solutions.
Yeah, I think it's really, if you can laugh at yourself, then your ego has no, like, really, it has to kind of take its walls down a bit. Like, if you're
Yeah.
willing to laugh at yourself, because then you can, and or just the whole not take yourself too seriously. Because really, when you do take yourself too seriously, it's when your ego is in defending mode.
Yeah.
And when you're in that mode, it's really hard to kind of see get perspective, I guess,
Yeah.
or maybe where do I need to change or grow, because the ego doesn't like that, doesn't like change or
No.
grow.
No.
Yeah, which
And
is essential for life.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I love the fact that you also brought up about the younger generation, because I not only do I do what I do, but I'm big in education. I have a son around that age where they're like, people are like, well, what's going to come out of this generation and all that kind of stuff. And I often tell people, you're sleeping on this younger generation, because they're going to be the force to be reckoned with. When all is said and done and the baby boomers start to fizzle out, we're watching a almost like a pressure cooker. I can like look at it like they're like almost bubbling over, like they're rising up. And we see a lot of that coming out in like probably like the last 5 years or so, with just a lot of even like young activists that are coming out and voicing really some major things and topics and issues, social justice issues, that a lot of the adults can't even handle.
and yeah, like
Yeah.
it's kind of incredible. Like, wasn't it? It was that a young Swedish girl or Norwegian girl that said, "I'm taking time off school to protest what's happening to the
Yeah.
planet." And now it's just like rolled on. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
and that's just a testament
everyone's
to
got a
what we're talking about.
platform now,
Yeah.
and it can be used for really good stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And um, so big ups to all those youngsters out there. Keep doing what you're doing, because
yeah.
an
Honestly,
old
like,
guy like me
yeah,
appreciates that.
to all the kids out there that see stuff that's going on that's not right, like, good chance that you're onto something.
Yeah,
You
pretty much, yeah.
see the Amazon burning down, and it doesn't sit well with you, you know?
Yes, there may be something wrong.
Yeah, there's stuff going on. Yeah, 100%.
So Julian, we talked a lot about Riverdale. So
Yeah.
what is it like now, looking at it from, or hearing your story, how like your sister was in acting and you're getting into it, you get two major shows within like a week of each other. Now you're looking at it and you were on some of the biggest shows that, I said it earlier, Lucifer, Once Upon a Time, Riverdale, Arrow. We're big Arrow fans in this family. My son
Yeah.
and I are big comic fans. So like, what is that like, if you kind of in retrospect look back to where you were like, yeah, I don't know if I should do this, right? But now look at all your success that you've had.
Uh-huh.
What is that like? What is that like, surreal for you to be sitting and like some of the biggest shows, like on television right now?
Um,
How do you keep that in perspective?
I don't know. Like, I think it's really hard to grasp. I think it's almost like, you can't really get a perspective on how big a show like Riverdale is. Like, you can't really fathom that, or you don't feel how many eyes are watching the show. You could see the number of people but you wouldn't really get it or
Doesn't,
feel.
yeah, it
You know,
doesn't register.
I remember chatting to KJ on set, and he said that, like, he was like, "Hey, so apparently Nicole Kidman watches the show," and I was like,
Oh shit!
"Really?" And he was like, "Apparently, how cool is that?" I was like, "That's pretty cool." Yeah, so I mean, it perspective. I don't know. For me, the way it feels is like it's a bunch. It's kind of weird. Like, it's a bunch of people in a warehouse making a TV show. Like, I love it. Like, I want to be in that creative process and be a part of it. Um, but it's also somewhat removed from, it's not like there's an audience. It's not like
Yeah,
it's, it's pretty intimate. Like, if it's a scene and, it's me and KJ together, and then there's a lot of there's a lot of crew.
hmm
So you've got, like, people scattered around doing their role, but it feels pretty. It can feel pretty small, even when there's a bunch of extras. It can feel like everyone's there for this, like, common goal and common purpose. So it, yeah, you don't really. It doesn't feel like this big overwhelming thing. But I guess the thing that was kind of not overwhelming, but nerve-wracking for sure, was, like, the first time I did a scene and I'm sitting opposite Camilla and KJ in Pop's diner, and I'm like, what's my life right now? How did I end up? I just checked in that moment, and I was just like,
yeah,
how did I get in this seat opposite these two in this diner? Like, this is unreal. Like, this is
yeah.
crazy. Um, and then we, and then, like, me and KJ just started talking about, like, just silly stuff. And I think, like, for me, I don't know, it's such a mixture of, like, yeah, the big stuff's fun, but, like, really, like, it's the little stuff that I miss being on set. Like, KJ, KJ was like, he's like, oh yeah, like, do you surf? I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, do you surf? He's like, oh, not really, but I kind of tell people I do. And then, and then I'm going to throw him under the bus now. And then, and then, he was like, he pointed at, like, the vinegar bottle,
hmm
and he was like, hey bro, what's this stuff? And I was like, like, are you fucking with me? That's vinegar. He's like, I'm like, are you fucking with me? And he's like, I thought it was sugar. And I'm like, this is the first time I've met him, and and I'm just like, what do you mean it's sugar? No, it's vinegar. Like, you've been, and I'm like, you've been in this diner for, like, 2 years. What do you mean? Like, this stuff sits on the table the whole time. Like, what do you mean? Haven't you asked anyone else? He's like, I thought it was sugar. Like, I thought it was, like, liquid sugar. And I'm just like, no, dude, it's vinegar. I really thought he was fucking with me. But, like, that stuff, I mean, that stuff's priceless. When you get good energy people on sets, like, it's just the best fun. So,
Yeah, it looks like you guys have a great time doing it, and um, I think that's what we get to see is that there looks like there's, like, a really good camaraderie between the cast, and that I can tell you from a viewer that definitely conveys on the opposite side of the camera, from where we sit at. So
yeah.
where does, like, I think you've hinted a little bit about it, and, like, I feel like you could do you said, getting more involved in the creative process. You seem to have a great perspective for the intricacies of being an actor. So do you have like aspirations to do like maybe writing or
Yeah.
any?
So my dad's a screenwriter, and he was kind of more busy with it in sort of the 70s and 80s. He still writes quite a lot actually, but and yeah, I think I can't really help it because, or think about it at least. And I wrote a pilot for a sitcom earlier this year, and I was like, you know what? I just want to get this onto paper, so I'm just going to write it because I had this idea for a long time, and I'm like, who cares if it's shit? Like, just write it, just see what happens. And I haven't really revisited it, but because I find that for me personally, I can easily start entertaining ideas about like, oh, maybe I should be a rock star, or maybe I should be a director, maybe I should be doing this, that, maybe I should start a business. Like, so easily can I get on like these other tracks. And so still want to keep acting as my main priority, but I can't help it. Yeah, who knows? What I can't help but think about it would be great to be a part. Yeah, producing or maybe directing or maybe writing. Yeah, like especially I really love films. I really love movies, and that's kind of what I got into the business for. And so I would love to be a part of that process somehow and be able to tell stories that way. Because really, as an actor, you're trying to channel a character, and you don't like you're kind of a servant to the writer,
Yeah.
and be that vessel in a way. And I love that. I want to be good at that. I want to be really good at that. But I think it's also another thing to be creative in that I'm going to create a character. I'm going to create a world. I'm going to create this story that hopefully people will connect with. So, I mean, yeah, there's aspirations there for sure.
I can definitely see that. I can definitely see us following that journey with you because I could see that you have such a great love for what you do, and I feel like you're bubbling over with like a lot of these like ideas that I feel like I could see it behind
Yeah.
stirring up there. So like I definitely would love to see.
Yeah, I can't really help it. Like, I mean, my Instagram tends to be me posting a lot of just me making stuff up and being pretty silly. But I do that, and sometimes it's not received amazingly well. But I feel good doing it. I like being creative and making
Yeah.
stuff up. And so if I can do that and live my life doing that, I mean, someone who I really love watching their stuff is Taika Waititi, and he's going to be directing the newer Thor, so he's doing Thor again. And when he brings his flavor to stuff, it's because he's willing to take those comedic risks, and and he's a good energy person. You can just see that in everything that he does. And he gives permission to like the actors to really go for it and make bigger choices and find funny moments. And I think that's been a lot of Marvel's success, is like they put that element in their stuff. But I think especially Guardians of the Galaxy, but now with Ragnarok, it's just so funny.
Yeah.
Thor just not taking himself seriously. Like, we love.
Yeah. Especially after seeing the last
that character, because he's such a tough guy and such.
Yeah.
And then when he came out in the fat suit in the newest
that
one,
was
like
hilarious.
And Hemsworth is good at that too, right? But yeah. So I mean, yeah, Taika Waititi, he started off in New Zealand making independent comedies, and um, I've I've got no idea how he's done it, but it's like, wow, what a guy, you know. So yeah, sometimes I get torn up, like, oh, like if I was to do that, would I just do comedy or would I just do drama? And I think it's really, once again, that's one of those things that it's that outside perspective that holds us back. It's like Jim
Yeah.
Carrey. Jim Carrey is one of the best actors that we've ever seen, and he's one of the funniest comedians we've ever seen, and best dramatic actors we've ever seen, I think.
Yeah.
He's a good actor. Like,
Yeah.
he's good.
No matter what he's in,
and he
Cam.
can paint,
Yeah.
like he's an artist.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's that mixture of, like, you don't want to be a jack of all trades, but you also don't want to box yourself in. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Well, I hope that we do get to see that, because I think that just from speaking with you, in this short conversation, that I can feel that we've only just begun to see what Julian really has to bring to the table in the entertainment world. So I really I
Honestly,
dig to.
that means a lot. That means a lot. And yeah, I'll take that little bit and I'll add it to the confidence bank.
Definitely do so. I mean, only because, I've spoken to, like I said, a bunch of people in doing this in the short time that I have, and I'm always engaged in learning with people and what they're bringing to the table when they have such a conviction and passion like you have, and you can tell that you wholeheartedly love what you do, you love the craft, and that's what makes us want to see more of what you're going to be bringing to this table. That I think you have a long, lustrous career ahead of you, and now maybe your sister is like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
He's giving me a run for my money, which is great. Like, have you and your sister ever thought about, like, maybe doing something together?
Um, I I would love to work with her in some regard, but yeah, I think, have you ever heard Jake Gyllenhaal talk about working with his sister?
Yes, I have.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
'Cause they played siblings in Donnie Darko,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so, like, it'd be, yeah, there would be, like, conflict. There just would be in some regard, so it's kind of a scary prospect, but it's also, it would be a dream come true for sure as well. So, and because we grew up making stuff up and filming, like, little skits and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, it would be so cool. Yeah, I think she's recently had an idea. Her husband's a screenwriter as well, and they recently had an idea that they were sort of pitching to people, and um, I don't think they've written a character for me, unfortunately, but but hopefully they can get some funding or get a production company involved or whatever. But yeah, we'll see. I really hope at some point it kind of happens organically.
Hmm.
And we also, I think there might be a bit of a common dream in that, my dad wrote a movie back in the day called BMX Bandits, and we wanted to be a part of something, going forward with that. But
Hmm.
we just don't know what's going to happen at all with what's, could happen with more of that sort of stuff. But it would be an absolute dream come true to be a part of that world, and
That
to
would be
be,
so awesome.
oh, it'd be so cool. Have you heard of the movie BMX
Have I?
Bandits?
Yeah, of course I have. Of
Do you
course I
know it?
have.
Do you know it?
Yes.
It was
Yes.
it was Nicole Kidman's
In his
first movie.
first movie, yes. I
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am I'm like an 80s baby, so of course I know
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
like that.
Okay, well, because, like, we don't really know how big it was in the States. I mean, it was well known in Australia and then
Yeah.
fairly big in the UK.
Hmm.
Um, And my dad seems to think that it didn't do very well, but I think that's just him being stupidly modest.
I think that's him being modest because I feel like it was a fairly decent movie here for us in the U.S. I mean, I remember it as a kid. I actually remember I've seen it, like, even as an adult I've watched it. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh
just
wow!
because it's part of, like, my growing up. That was a movie that I used to watch.
I'm gonna have to get Dad to listen to this bloody podcast now.
Definitely, Dad. I absolutely loved it. I mean,
Listen here,
if it
Papa
wasn't for
Rusty.
if it wasn't for that film, we may not have ever seen the likes of Nicole Kidman.
Uh, yeah, don't know if that's true, but maybe. I mean, I think she was, at that point, she had some momentum somehow. I don't know, but maybe.
Well, that was when she first came into this young guy's life, because that was when she was like hot. You know what I mean? Like, who was that girl? You know what I mean? Like,
Red Afro. Yeah.
yeah. No, yeah, that definitely tell Dad that movie definitely did make a mark on a lot of people's lives here in the United States, and it was a big part of '80s culture growing up.
Yeah,
In
like I know a lot
my
of
time.
people that were like, I was a BMX bandit, like
Yeah,
like kids on bikes.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
that would be amazing to see, like, his children being in some way, if you guys are not actors or in some way in the creative process, if it was redone, that would be, like, I think it would go over so well. I think it's something about that movie would transpire into. I think kids would really love that, or not even like. Yeah, I think if it was redone, especially by you guys in some way or fashion, it would definitely be received tremendously by a younger generation. I think it holds the story holds. You know what I mean? It still would be, like, relevant today.
I really think so. Yeah, but but we'll see. Sometimes these sorts of things they can take a long time, and
Oh, sure.
but yeah, we'll see. I would love
So
that
so
to
Julian,
come
a
true.
couple of silly questions before I let you go. So, we talked to you, very deep brother. This guy has been, which I'm pleasantly surprised.
Oh, great.
Um, I like to have a deep conversation with people beyond just the superficial stuff of, acting world and all that. I think what you guys do as actors, we don't realize how much goes into it, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And those tools are the same tools that I think people can lend to use in their everyday lives. And I think you guys as actors kind of perfect those things is because you're in tune with feelings, you're in tune with emotions, you're in tune with experiences that other people in life, like you said before, we kind of try to turn those off rather than embrace them. And I think there's something about being in a creative realm like you are that allows for those skills that other people tend to bury to flourish.
Well,
And
Brene Brown, you're probably aware
mhm,
of her, and her stuff,
absolutely.
on vulnerability, and then also her second talk on, like, I think it was the power of invulnerability or something like that.
Yes.
And I think it's just the fact that you're going to be put in a lot of vulnerable situations, especially in acting training, and then also you're putting yourself into the arena where you're open to a lot of criticism, and um, yeah, in a way, it's like it's that whole, everything she talks about in those two talks. It really resonates with acting, and artists in general, but it does apply directly to everybody.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's almost like with acting, you just kind of you're forced to live more that way,
Yeah.
and it's which is kind of like in a way it's this weird privilege. you know
Yeah. No, it is. It is. And so I want to kind of spin things a little lighter and ask you a couple of pop culture kind of questions. So what are you watching right now, like on TV?
Okay.
Yeah, and there could be, you could throw in some guilty pleasures if, you know.
Oh, 100%. Okay, so my latest guilty pleasure has been Australian Survivor.
Okay.
Because I find it hard to get invested in TV series because then I have to watch the whole thing and it's like hours and hours and hours. So I find like, yeah, I don't know. Survivor was on TV when I got back to Australia and then I just got so into it because I loved Survivor growing up. And then I didn't know there was an Australian version. So now it's just finished, so I'm a bit devastated. But I was loving every second of it. The other thing I've been watching on Netflix was, it's weird, I'm not into necessarily like NFL, but I don't know what it is, but I love, like one of my favorite movies is Remember the Titans.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I'm not a sports guy either, but I love that movie.
I love that movie. And then I've been watching a Netflix documentary series called QB1, and it's about high school quarterbacks. And it's just so fascinating to me. I don't know why, but maybe because I was a bit like I grew up playing tennis and was like wanting to be Roger Federer growing up, and so maybe it's like that common athletic dream or something. But like, there's so much pressure on these kids, and they're like rock stars. I didn't realize how crazy you Americans were for like high school football. Like, it's crazy, you guys. Like, settle down. Leave these kids alone.
Yeah, and you have to specify it because in my household, there's the constant argument of football versus football, American football. My son's a soccer player, so
yeah,
football is. It's funny to hear him have a conversation with my father, who is the epitome American football guy, and then my son is a soccer player who, to him, that's football. So to hear them go back and forth.
Well, to an Australian, because football for us is AFL, Australian rules football, and you kick the ball quite often. Like, whereas in American football, you punt the ball sometimes, and then maybe kick a field goal. Like, most of the time, you're throwing and catching. So it should really be arm ball.
Or handball.
I just lost a lot of Americans with that one comment.
No, that's okay. So what if you were, okay, so QB1, that's something I'm not watching, so I'm going to have to check it out. I'm sure
Check it out. It's so good. They follow 3 quarterbacks from different high schools in different states.
Okay.
And they basically, like, the first episode is like kind of like the preseason training. Episode 2 is like first game of the season, and they kind of go along the season to the last game kind of thing. And they talk about like what college they're going to go to. And these kids are like, seriously, they're like celebrities. And I didn't realize, like, people know who these kids are, and they're just at high school. They're just trying to like live their high school lives and study, and they're all really interesting characters. You know, some of them are like, I'm not arrogant, and then they're like super arrogant, and then like but some of them are like super humble, and it's really cool. It's really cool. I don't know why I'm so addicted to it, but I've nearly finished.
I'll have to check it out because I'm sure my son is not watching that because I would know about it if he was because it would be on all the time. But I'll definitely have to check it out and have him check it out. What about movies? What was the last movie that you saw in the movie theater?
I saw It Chapter 2.
What'd you think? I just saw that 2 nights ago.
Yeah, I thought it was all right. I preferred the first one. I agree. I think it's just because the first one, it's like Stranger Things. Like, they did the nostalgic thing really well, and the humor was really there. And there was something about the second one that was like, it felt a little bit forced in a lot of moments, and
I agree.
Cut together, kind of a bit funny.
And I also think that there's something that has to be said about Yeah, there is also something to be said about um, like a character like Pennywise and the fear that comes out of the children
Yeah.
versus that come out of the adults. I don't know. That's just my take on it. I just
Well,
think it's
I really love the message that, you know, basically when they stand up to that thing, that to Pennywise, that's where it starts to lose its power, and how like really their fear is fueling it and everything. I love
mhm.
that. That to me is just like it really, it's a good theme with life, and yeah, fear and ego and all that sort of stuff. Or yeah, I really loved that aspect, but I don't know. I think the second one just kind of lost that a little bit. Um, maybe you're right too. Like with the adults. Also, you know, they had a really good cast in the second one, but man, like it's hard when kid actors are on.
They're on.
It's impossible to beat. Like they're just so good. Like
Yeah.
they're so funny and quick and yeah.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And it's funny because I just saw that last night. I was just talking to somebody that I know about. They were asking me what I thought about it. And I even from watching the original Stephen King series when it came on TV, the first one it had that same effect back then too. Where the first one really like kind of pulled people in, and then the second one, you know, you kind of lost some folks along the way, but I guess it's consistent with what what we just both saw. So
What
what a
what movie are you looking forward to seeing next? Do you have one lined up?
so I wouldn't say it's what I'm saw next versus what I just recently saw. So I am a big horror. I love all things horror.
Oh yeah.
So I recently just saw Three from Hell, which stars Rich Brake, which he's going to be on the show in a couple of days. He was one of the original actors who played the Night King in Game of Thrones. He also was in a movie. He a lot of his notoriety comes from Rob Zombie movies.
Yeah.
Um, so they're like very like B movie ish, but like done really well. So he was in a movie that Rob Zombie made by the name of 31, and he played like a really notorious villain called Doomshead. He's now in Rob Zombie made three movies. Well, the first one was House of a Thousand Corpses, which was it's basically like a Manson family type of family.
Oh,
They're like a family of serial killers. So the first one, and they're called the Fireflies. That's the name of the family. And the first movie, it kind of like brings into who they are. The second movie, a lot of people have heard the sequel to that, which is The Devil's Rejects. That kind of goes even more deeper into who the Firefly family is, but they get caught at the end of that movie. So this new part of it
yeah.
was like 20 years after they've gotten caught and they're kind of all locked up and they escape from prison. They get each other out of prison and how they return back to their kind of killing sprees. But this one was not so much a slasher kind of film than it was a resemblance of like natural born killers, whereas you're almost like rooting for the serial killers to not get caught so they can stay out there and do their thing. And it's really really, and out of all the movies that Rob Zombie has made budget wise, this has been the he's had the most money to finances thing. So it really had some good legs on it, and it was only in supposed to be in theaters for 3 days, but it did so well that they're kind of like pumping it out again. So If you're
Right.
into stuff like that, definitely check it out. Dee Wallace is in it, who is the mom from
Well,
E.T.
it's tricky because in Australia we don't get all the same releases,
The
right?
same releases.
Now that I'm back here, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
Well,
horrors are out at the moment.
well, I'll have to see when I talk to Rich Break in a couple of days what's going on over there in Australia and
No.
and see if you're into that thing. Definitely check it out. So that's kind of what I'm more, to be honest with you, into like really good TV now. So like I recently just watched a show on Netflix that is from France called Marianne, and it's about someone who is writes. She's like a writer, and basically everything that she writes in her books are kind of come to life. So I'm into kind of like all kinds of different stuff like that. Like we watch Wentworth, we watch like I watch stuff like from all over the world. So I like
So,
kind of getting into different things that
some Aussie, considering BMX Bandits. I think like some Aussie kind of like cult stuff and
well,
have,
only other thing I know is Vegemite, but
okay. You haven't watched any Summer Heights High or Kath and Kim?
no, I haven't.
Oh man, yeah. There's a whole rabbit hole you could go down with Aussie comedy. And what about? Have you seen The Castle, the movie The Castle? If
No.
there's any Aussie movie anyone should ever watch, it's The Castle. It
Look,
is.
I'm
It's
writing
one of
that
the
down right
best,
now.
honestly. It's one of the best comedies of all time. Doesn't matter what country you're from. Give it a crack.
I definitely will. I definitely will. And
Yeah.
one last question. Well, before I kind of get into like what you have coming up next, if we were to look on your playlist, who would be like the top, maybe one or two artists that you listen to on heavy rotation right now?
It's going to be hard to keep to one or two. I would, at the moment, I would probably say a mixture of Bon Iver. I don't know if it's Bon Iver or Bon Iver, but it's
Bon
like,
Iver, yeah.
yeah, I listen to Bon Iver like almost daily. He's insane. He's so good.
Yeah.
Matt Corby, he's an Aussie artist. Same thing, like just fuck, he's so talented. It's crazy. Tame Impala's on there quite a bit. And then there's a relatively newer Aussie girl, and what's her name? Sampa the Great. And
Hmm.
she's got this song. I'm going to have to look up the name. Let me think. Final Form. And it's the best song I've heard this year. Oh my God. Yeah. She's going to blow up. She's killing it. Yeah.
What was her name again?
I think it's Sampa the Great. Sampa the Great. Yeah, she's an Aussie hip hop star. I think she's got African. Either she's from Africa, she's moved to Australia, or her parents are African, and like she's this hip hop star that's just blowing up. Like she's holy. This song it's in my head. Oh man, it's just like, I heard it on Triple J on the radio here, and I was just like, "Who is this? This is insane." I was so, and then my friend was like, "Oh, she's from Melbourne." I was like, "What?" Like,
No, I like
so
her even more.
so good.
No,
Yeah.
I definitely am gonna put her on my must listen list. So and so Julian, before I let you go, I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell people what you have coming up.
It's always a tough question, isn't it?
Hmm.
No, I mean at the moment, because I've been, basically readjusting to life back in Australia. I've just been auditioning for stuff, and there's less going on in Australia than there is in Canada and in LA, that's for sure. But I'm still taping for stuff over there. So, I've auditioned for, a pilot recently, a movie recently, another series. So I just have to keep plugging away and hopefully get something, because it'd be great to be working
Doing
on
what you love to do.
Yeah, finding a new character to work on would be great. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, unfortunately, not much to report on other than that. And also, I've just started as an ambassador in Australia. There's a charity campaign called Polished Man. So that's something that I've just started fundraising for, and basically it's a charity to help end violence against children. So all the funding goes out to basically other campaigns and organizations that support children and support, in different ways, and ending violence against kids. And it's worldwide. So yeah, if anyone wants to, they can always check out my profile on that as well. We'll find a link at Instagram. And so, yeah, I'm just going to be this month, October, going to be painting a nail. So that's part of the campaign. It's you paint a fingernail. And, yeah, I think it's a really cool idea. There's a bit of a story behind the whole painting the nail thing, which I won't get into, but it is a great thing because, as a guy, you never paint a nail, but when you do, you wake up the next day and it's there. And it's this great reminder of oh yeah, this is what we're trying to accomplish this month. So,
I totally like that.
Yeah, it's cool.
So it's called Polished Man, you said, right?
Polished Man, yeah.
Okay, Julian, at some point, can you send me some info on it? Because what I want to do is want to be able to put it into the comment section of this video. So when it goes live, people can check it out and can support the cause. And besides the Polished Man, can people follow you? Give us your social media contacts, all that kind of stuff.
Probably just Instagram. That's the one that I'm most active on, which is just my name, Julian Haig, at Julian Haig. And I just started a TikTok account.
Everybody's TikToking.
I don't really know what I'm doing, but I think might be a fun way to make some little short skits and put out some funny stuff. And that's the same thing. That's at Julian Haig if you're on TikTok.
Well, Julian, I really enjoyed my time talking to you. I think you're a really deep guy beyond what we see on Riverdale. Not an asshole, not a dick.
Sometimes.
We all are. Most days I am. So you call me on a good day.
Yeah. Thanks, Frankie. I enjoyed it too, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, buddy. And everybody, I want you to, I'm going to put the in the description to this video, the info on Polished Man and how you can reach out to Julian and all his work. If you're not watching Riverdale, go ahead and start binge watching it so you guys can absolutely fall in love with it. I love it. I recommend it to everybody who's a big TV fan and a big comic fan. And Julian, again, thanks for coming on UNnormalized Podcast, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Alrighty, everybody, that's the UNnormalized Podcast with your host Frankie A and Julian Haig. And everybody, get unnormalized.